I have a unique way to move the performance of an organization built upon my doctoral research.
So you are an ex-military, and then you went to the higher education to get multiple degrees. Was it a culture shock to you?
The Army infantry tested my body. My doctorate tested my mind.
You mentioned 4 degrees. How much time did it take?
Leadership actually wasn't as important to performance as the overall environment was. And it took me months of research to show this to be true.
Hello, my name is Alex Elish, and this is Big Performance Podcast. Today, I'm super excited for the guest today because sometimes when people see me, they ask me to go see a doctor for some reason, maybe because of my colorful personality. So, my guest today is Dr. James Chitwood. And the second celebration is that it's the first guest that kind of has performance straight in their title. So, welcome.
Thank you, Alex. Pleasure to be here.
James, how did you come to the performance niche, and what is the story behind you getting there?
Yeah, absolutely, Alex. I like to say I'm a reluctant consultant. This wasn't the path I perceived I would walk down. I had a troubling childhood, joined the Army to get my head screwed on straight, went to college, ended up with 4 degrees later, a doctorate. I worked in higher education. I've been a university president, I've been a university professor. That's really where I expected my place to be. I left higher education to enter the ed tech startup world for a while and was involved in multiple startups, helping them develop operations. And what I learned along the path is that I have a unique way to move the performance of an organization built upon my doctoral research. So my research was in um, leadership, employees' job satisfaction, and employee productivity. Right. So it was a connection between those three elements. And what I came to in the end, which I found was surprising, was that leadership actually wasn't as important to performance as the overall environment was. And so that was just kind of shocking, but I just went about my life. Again, in the ed tech world, I developed one department or one division for an organization after another. I did that repeatedly. I was involved in some turnarounds. And there was an aha moment after I had developed my last operation for a company where kind of the universe smacked me in the back of the head for the next time and said, Jim, just go do your own thing. You are really great at developing operations that produce optimal performance.
James,
Yeah.
I want to stop you there because there was something that you said that is a little bit weird to me. So you are an ex-military, and then you went to the higher education to get multiple degrees, and you found out that leadership might not be the important part. Was it a culture shock to you compared to what you were led to believe during your military time?
Yeah, absolutely, Alex. It's a very spot on observation at the time. I was kind of taken aback. I was a little shocked. I expected the results to come back and say, oh, yeah, leadership is the most important thing to employee productivity. It matters to job satisfaction, but it doesn't matter to productivity. And so I was really taken aback by that. And then I had to just get in and dig into the research and really look into what other examples, what other empirical data existed to support this observation, this finding that I came up with. And there's lots of studies that prove this same thing, that leadership really isn't all that. And, when we think about the American military, everybody thinks, oh, well, the American military is built on great leaders. It's actually a fallacy. It's not true at all. The American military is built upon a great system. One of the things that makes the American military so strong compared to other countries like Russia, North Korea, is that those other countries have a very top down style. It is very leadership driven. The leaders are the only ones who know the entire battle plan. And so everybody else learns it in a just in time, need to know basis. And so many corporations run this way as well. I work with companies and they're like, well, I will tell them when they need to know that information. Well, I should probably tell them now so they can make better decisions. And that's what makes our American military so strong, is that we've developed an environment where everybody knows the battle plan. So if you take out a leader, the next person in line can step up and take leadership over the group because the whole group already knows what they're doing. When they get to a crossroad, the group knows they're hanging a left. They don't have to wait for the leader to tell them they're hanging a left. At the beginning of the Ukraine war, we really saw practical applications of this. We saw that when the Ukrainians took out the Russian tank commanders and the Russian battle leaders, the Russian forces stopped. They had no idea what to do, right? Because in that military regime, only the top leaders know the battle plan and they tell everybody else on a need to know basis, right? Whereas in the American military, everybody knows the battle plan so that everybody can make better informed decisions. So if you lose a leader, everybody else needs to know, or everybody already knows what to do. And the same is totally true in a corporation. Those corporations who run on a need to know basis have less performance than those that have a very decentralized bit of information sharing and everybody knows what's going on. So, yeah, Alex, it was rather shocking. And it took me months of research to find other examples and other empirical data to show this to be true.
What was your educational journey? Because you mentioned 4 degrees. Did it take, how much time did it take, and did you need 4 degrees to study the empirical data from other people and to find out your doctoral thesis in the end?
Yeah, great question, Alex. I don't know. I've kind of just been going through life. I got out of college and I went and I completed an associate's degree. And then I went to the 4-year university and completed my bachelor's. And then I went on. I actually got my master's because I joined a university. They recruited me, joined the organization, and allowed me to get a master's degree. And that's where I figured I would spend the rest of my life in education. I really like the concept of helping people, which is why I do what I do now. And I really thought that that was going to be my career. I was going to work in education the rest of my life. And then I pursued a doctorate because it was hard. I had no desire to get a doctorate. It wasn't an objective of mine. I just did it because it was intellectually challenging. I like to say the Army infantry tested my body. My doctorate tested my mind, and so that's why I literally did it. Was because it was hard, and I had an idea for a thesis that I wanted to study, and talking to a provost friend of mine, she said, "Jim, that's a really great idea for a book. You better pick something you are passionate about, not interested in, but passionate about, because you're going to need to be writing papers at 2 o'clock in the morning and you're going to need to be doing mountains of research. And if you're not passionate about this subject, you'll never get through the program." And it was extremely salient advice for me. Just so I said, what do I love? I love leadership. I love performance. I like people. I like creating environments. And so I just studied the connection between leadership, job satisfaction, and productivity.
What kind of systems do you propose for organizations that you work with? Because I hear that you think about that a lot, because in creating the environment where the organization performs well is your focus. So sometimes, as you say, with Russian military, communication systems can fail you with top down approach. So what is your recommendation for a company that comes to you?
Yeah, absolutely, Alex. So, number one, the key thing here is that you have to look beyond your leaders and look at your organizational systems. What are called there's social systems, which involve your people, and there's formal systems, which involve your operation as a whole, right? Your policies, procedures, your practices, and so that's what I look at. My my model is one where I believe that training, recognition, accountability, and communication all work together as a single strategy. Organizations have recognition strategies, and obviously they should, anyways, have ways of holding people accountable. Training is one of those things that often just gets cut the second there's any budget issues, and communication is never thought of. Organizations spend a lot of time and money thinking about how they communicate externally, not so much on how they communicate internally. And I firmly say that the quickest way to motivate or demotivate people is messing with their pay. But aside from that, it's the communication. And so most organizations, they just talk to their people with what I call brand speak, right? The same way they talk to the external environment. And that's a real problem because you have to put your communication in lines of how does it help the person do their job better? How do they fit into the solution? And how do they provide value in creating that optimal output, that next phase, right? Um, Training, if you look at all of these four as one strategy, you can't separate training from accountability because they are intertwined. When a person is performing, then maybe they can train someone else. When someone isn't performing, then maybe someone else needs to come in and train them. I'm a real big believer that it's that a company needs training. They don't necessarily need training departments. Well, they need people to help them develop the training. But I really believe the best training is going to come from peers and direct level managers and up. So I like to say that your training department is great as an instructional design tool, but the people doing the training should be the people doing the job. Accountability is fascinating because I'm amazed at how many people in organizations don't actually do directly what their job description is, and they don't have weekly measurements, and they go into their annual reviews without any idea how that review is going to come out. No employee should ever walk into an annual review not already knowing the outcome, just plain and simple. And they should know that because every single week they were meeting with their supervisor, and the supervisor was talking to them about their performance and helping them look for ways to improve or looking for ways that that individual can help someone else improve. And what's fascinating about, again, this is all one strategy, is that this is also part of recognition. If an employee is asked to help train someone else, you are recognizing the excellence of that person. You are making them feel better because you are acknowledging their ability to aid someone else in their performance. And that's an intrinsic value that that person receives. Whenever we give to someone, we feel a little bit of joy inside. And so that's a unique form of recognition that you can't buy, right? It's not a plaque. It's not a, well, I have a starfish here that I used to give out, right? It's not that type of stuff, right? And so, and then,
It's like mentorship high. When you see the person that you invest in, you see them grow and perform better. It's something akin to, uh, yeah, mentorship situation akin to fatherly instinct of like promoting growth, giving tools and the challenge to another person and see that they can effectively utilize what you've given them to overcome the challenge.
right. Yeah, absolutely. You kind of asked what are the first things I work on. Even though I believe communication to be so strong, the first things I really dig into are, how does recognition work in their company? How do individuals have the ability to recognize each other? And then how does the compensation work in that company? Here's the rub, Alex. Compensation falls in the bottom level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It provides food on our table and roof over our head. That's what
Yeah.
compensation is. And so I always say you can't motivate a starving person. If that employee has no idea whether or not they're going to get a raise next year because they don't have clearly defined metrics that are going to help them understand if they're going to achieve whatever measurement it needs to be for them to get a raise, then they have no idea if they're going to lose money next year. If their pay stays the same, but the cost of living goes up, then they've lost money. It's a simple math equation, right? Or even if they got a 3.5% raise and the cost of living went up 3.7, they're losing money. And everybody knows this, right? Subconsciously, we know this. So the first things I look at is recognition. How are you recognizing the performance of your employees? And part of that is compensation. Most organizations have some form of recognition for their salespeople, right? But do they have it for their accountants, right? Or what about the people in R&D? Or what about the programmers? Or what about the HR personnel? All right. So many organizations don't think about them as needing that type of recognition because they don't think their jobs are as hard as sales, and they don't need to motivate them as much. And I think that's an extreme fallacy. You're going to create a pretty bad environment if only one part of your organization has the ability to receive bonuses, goes on trips, gets the plaques, gets the recognition, and this other department and this other team doesn't. You're not going to create a holistic environment in that scenario.
Startups are there trying to solve the things on paper. Everyone gets paper equity. You get some stock, you get some stock, even though we are not listed anywhere and that stock costs nothing. Everyone gets the bonus on paper, but sales do get uh, money bonus. And this is still okay because salespeople are expensive. Good sales are not easy to find, and they move the bottom line numbers. So we still don't pay them in money. Everyone else gets stock.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
what I wanted to ask you about this, like bottom of the pyramid, still. What do you think about the old story of Ford getting the payments to their factory workers, as he said, as high as that they can buy a car? And that was groundbreaking at that moment because other factories were not paying as much.
yeah, absolutely. I was just reading a post about Netflix's pay structure. They don't offer cash bonuses to anybody. What they do is pay people at the top of the range, right? And to make sure that they have the money, to the Ford example, to buy a car, right? When people have that security that they know, okay, I'm going to be able to take my family on a vacation, right? I'm going to be able to pay for milk if it goes up in price, or fix my car if something breaks down, right? Not living paycheck to paycheck, but have a little extra that I can save. Then they're going to perform better. I don't know if you've heard the story. Nintendo, they released a couple bad products, and the CEO could have cut his workforce. Instead, he cut his own pay, and he cut his executives' pay. His was a greater cut than theirs. It was still the leadership took the hit and not the people. And when asked about this, he said, listen, I could have cut in order to save money, in order to make us look good for the quarter. And 5 years from now, we would have been a worse company. Why? Because how can anybody do their best work if they don't know if they're next on the chopping block? And it's that same mentality, right? That if people are worried about their security, right? Again, bottom of the pyramid, if they're worried about their safety and security, they can't really think about anything else. Once you remove that, then you can start finding ways to motivate them at the higher levels.
Most of the companies that I know work in this level of just keeping people hanging in there.
Yeah,
So they will raise your salary just enough that you don't quit, just enough to be ahead of the inflation, maybe
maybe.
in a good year.
Yeah, yeah, in a good year. What's fascinating about that is that I believe organizations look at employees in one of two ways, and it relates to the balance sheet. Do you put your employees on the asset side of your balance sheet or the liability side of your balance sheet? Where do you place your employees? And it's a really important question. And it's a philosophical question that needs to be answered by the C suite. They all need to come along, including the CFO, most definitely, needs to think about, where do we place our employees? Are they assets or are they liabilities? Why? Because assets you invest in. You invest in assets to produce greater returns over time, right? It's
Hmm.
liabilities, you limit them, right? Your objective is to always limit your liabilities and increase your assets. I like to say I'm an Adam Smith capitalist. Adam Smith would espouse that you invest in all of your assets. The planet is an asset. You invest in it in order to produce returns over time, right? You can't deplete all your assets, or you don't have a business. Right? You need to have resources in order to grow your business. I like to say that Your intellectual property is not your greatest asset. It's the people who developed your intellectual property. It's not your technology. It's the people who developed your technology. Why? Because if you treat those people poorly, even if you made them sign some agreement that probably wouldn't hold up in court, they're still going to leave you and they're going to go to a competitor or they're going to start their own company and just do the same thing. And if you treat them as your assets, if you treat them as valuable members of your organization, then they don't have any need to go anywhere because their needs are being taken care of. And we're not just talking about compensation anymore now. We're starting to talk about all the higher levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Recognizing the importance that that person brought is hitting them at the highest level, right? By really allowing them to feel that they are special. Esteem isn't the highest level, it's the next one down, but it's still giving them that value and showing them that, yeah, you created this great technology. It's super cool. We're selling it. We're making money. We wouldn't have it without you. And you are what we're going to invest in.
Mhm. Two things that I see very connected in what you're saying would be recognition and accountability. For me, those are very close logicals because if you want to give your employees recognition, you need to understand where exactly their performance is worth this recognition, and the alignment of you understanding where the recognition is due and people performing so they would be recognized goes into this accountability. It's like, am I doing the right thing for this organization within this time frame and these priorities?
Right. Yeah, Alex, you really hit it when you said, am I? Right. It's very important that the employee understands how they're fitting in to the overall organizational performance, right? And so you should take your top level goals and they need to go all the way down, right? And so a person over here understands how their performance relates to this person's, relates to this organizational goal, right? It's very important that they have very regular performance meetings with their boss so that they know how they're fitting in. I am consistently amazed by companies that don't require weekly meetings for every employee with their manager. If a manager has too many employees to meet with regularly, then you've got a power structure problem. And that one person cannot be developing their people because they simply have too many people to manage. And that's an issue.
I understand. When you come to a company, apart from fixing up these communication processes and accountability, is there a technology that you are fond of, or saying like, this is what piece of software that will help you? Do you have something like that?
I do not, Alex. And the reason for that is every company's budget is different. You know, if I come in and say, "Oh, well, now you need to purchase this software," I don't believe I'm setting them up for success. I like to see the resources that they have and try to figure out how to work with them in order to develop whatever training we need or you know whatever tools. Often they have the tools and it's human capital, and so I try to work with that human capital to develop what is necessary. I am, I
What
will
kind of
say, a big fan of any intranet as a way of communication. You know, the thing about communication is that most organizations only think about a one-way communication channel, and that's from the top down. They don't think about communication back up, right? And unfortunately, the way communication goes back up is it goes from employee to manager, manager to director. And now it's been filtered once from the manager to the director. And then the director, if they move it forward, it gets filtered again. It gets filtered again. So it's a telephone game. By the time it gets to the C suite, it's already been filtered multiple times. So employees need to have a direct path of communication all the way up to the very top of the organization without the filtering that happens from any human being receiving information and giving it to someone else. It's just who we are. So I am a real big believer that organizations, if they're going to invest in anything, it's an intranet to store all their information that the employees need and to aid in the communication flow between the employee and the C suite and the C suite back to the employee.
So you're working very close to company culture. And with the topic of company culture, we are approaching the culture of safety, transparency, because the information gets filtered on the step one, ongoing from employee to the manager. This is already a filter that an employee will impose on themselves. Oh, what would they think? And what would their boss think about me and about this manager? So there is like already a filter installed, and the culture of safety transparency where employees are able to express maybe contrarian ideas, maybe express a feedback that criticizes something is not easy to find. How do you propose people introduce that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Alex. It is well, it's basically having two forms of feedback channels, one anonymous and one not anonymous, right? Employees need to have a channel to where, and it can be as simple as a suggestion box, right? Inside that's locked that only the C-suite has a key to, right? We're talking a small business where they just put a box over in the corner and the owner or the president, walks over there and opens it up. And here's the key: every single week, that needs to be reviewed with the entire organization, and they need to explain to the organization, okay, obviously it should be reviewed first because there might be something that's HR sensitive and it can't be related to the entire group. So once you remove those, everything else are likely suggestions for improvement. That's typically what people want to provide feedback on. Occasionally it's a gripe. Most of the time it's suggestions for improvement. And I'm a real big believer that your frontline employees are your canaries in your coal mine. They're the ones who are going to tell you whether you have the resources to take care of your customers or not, right? Because they're the ones hearing it, right? So they're the ones getting this information and need good ways to give it back. So what I always propose is, at minimum, get a suggestion box, stick it over in the corner, make sure it's locked, make sure you review it every week with your teams, removing the sensitive HR information. And the key here is talk about action plans. Explain why an idea won't work or why an idea will. It just might need to wait till next year when you can put it into the budget, right? Employees need to be heard even if their suggestion isn't acted upon. They need to know that the C suite is listening and will respond accordingly. So many suggestion boxes fall by the wayside because the suggestions go in there and the feedback never comes back. I've been in the rooms with executives who read these and laugh at them or scoff at them, and then, oh, I'm not giving feedback. Oh, that's ridiculous. Well, somebody took the time to give you the feedback. You should respond accordingly. And if it doesn't need to be acted upon, you need to tell them why not. If it does, you need to tell them, you need to develop an action plan for it. So I always say that as a leader, I ask everybody questions. I always wanted feedback. And I tell them, I may not be able to do anything with this feedback, but I want to hear from you. And so that's called psychological safety, when people know that they can give feedback without fear of repercussions. And so it all falls into that. How do you develop an environment where people feel comfortable giving feedback? And that comes from a completely transparent system.
As a doctor, you can tell me in what shape the organization need to be so that they get over themselves and come to you, because I know the dentist will not see a lot of people for general visit. They get a lot of patients that have a pain in their tooth. So how much pain does an organization occurs before coming to you?
Oh, that's fascinating. It's why I wrote my book, because oftentimes someone will read a book and it will cause a spark of interest, and that spark can be the generator. More often than not, Nobody goes to the dentist until that pain is so bad that now they need real work, right? You get a little toothache, you're like,
Yeah.
no, where I won't worry about it. And then 6 months later, now it is really hurting and really painful. And now someone goes to see the dentist to get it taken care of. It's the same thing with most organizations. They won't do it unless there is pain that causes them to do it. Typically, high turnover rates. Typically, performance issues that they can't identify why, can't figure out why people aren't performing. And so, just like the dentist, it's not until the point of pain that most people reach out. Now, I wrote my book for the same reason people write articles about dentistry and tooth care, because occasionally that will drive someone's interest to be piqued. And when that occurs, then they're more interested in doing a little research on this.
Performance issues, how do you look at the market and see changes? Do the people perform better? I would think that no, the performance goes lower and lower with all the distractions, with all the information clutter and sky falling mentality. Also, what I hear is that people work less hours than before. How does that affect productivity from your perspective?
Absolutely. That goes back to that environment. Um, People in the workplace, we can have a shared goal. And if we have a shared goal, then we can rally around it and pursue it to excellence. If we want to. Back to, if our safety and security is taken care of, and we are part of a team environment where we're all driving forward, we're far more inclined to do that. Here's an interesting statistic. An employee is more likely to work harder and longer for a company if they believe the company has their back, even if they don't have the company's back. So if they believe that the company is willing to invest in them and lift them up and develop them, then they're more inclined to be retained by that organization longer and to perform better, even if they don't really care much about the company and its mission, right? They're they're going to do it because they believe they're in an environment that produces that. There are lots of distractions in this world right now. Again, in the organization, there are shared goals. And if you bring everybody around those, then they can easily rally and unite behind them. A long time ago, people worked for companies for a very long time. Nowadays, the younger generation, they're not interested in titles of prestige. They're interested in work life balance. They've seen what happens when people, bleed their soul for a company only to have the company toss them to the side. They're like, no, I'm not going to try to find my fulfillment in the workplace. I'm going to find my fulfillment outside of the workplace. My job is just a job. And so, one of the things that I talk about, and I believe is just so important, is to find out, why does that person have their job? What are their personal goals? What are they intrinsically hoping to achieve? When you can find that out and you can align that with the organization's goals, you can help the employee pursue their goals by pursuing the organization's goals. So when you're talking to them on a one-on-one every single week, it's not just about the company's goals. It's also about their personal goals and how they're driving to that, and how this job is helping them achieve those goals. So all of a sudden, you create the symbiotic relationship where the employee, while they might be working for the organization's goals, psychologically, they're actually working for their own goals. And that creates an environment where they want to achieve the organization's goals because what they really want to achieve are their goals.
In the situation where every every person needs their own thing, if we don't think in the terms like super global things, like everyone wants to be loved, how do we can we harness this super common human trait to drive it to the company performance?
Yeah, absolutely. This goes back to recognition. What's fascinating is most organizations, even if they take care of that bottom level, they then jump up a level to start hitting people at esteem, and that's where bonuses can come in and public recognition and performance. There's social bonding in the middle, and just like any pyramid, if you don't take care of every single one of your levels, if one of your levels isn't strong, your pyramid's going to fall, right? It's the same with any structure, and humans are no different, right? So that comes back to social bonding. And social bonding, one of the things that I like to work with companies on is finding ways for employees to recognize other employees and departments to recognize other departments. You know, the old saying that a pat on the back from a boss goes a long way? I'm a big believer in that. Very true. Pat on the back from the boss goes a long way. Pat on the back from a coworker goes even further, especially if that's in a large group meeting, right? If in that group meeting you have an employee recognizing another employee's performance and say, I couldn't do my job if it wasn't for that person. Look at how great that person is. That bonding right there is extremely powerful. And that creates that social bonding, which does have an element of love in it. And same thing with departments. You know, so often the only department that gets recognized is the sales department. Who's recognizing the accountants, right? Who's really spending time recognizing the programmers? I haven't been in any company that properly recognizes the R&D team or the accounting team. Yet if the sales department says, listen, I wouldn't be able to sell anything if the R&D department hadn't produced this awesome, right? Like if they find ways to recognize other departments, when departments can lift up other departments, now we have entire groups of people feeling that social bonding with each other and that sense of love at that friendship social level. And it's incredibly powerful. There's an old saying, people quit bosses and stay for teams. It's an extremely old saying in the world of leadership, and my own research pointed towards that. It's very true. How I've spoken with so many people who said, "Yeah, kind of here because I love my coworkers. Don't like my boss. I don't really care about the company, but I love my coworkers, and so I'm here." Right? That social bonding is incredibly powerful. And listen, we spend more time in the workplace than we do at our home. Well, I work from home, a little different for me, but for most people, we spend more time in the workplace than at home. So when you have that environment where there's strong social bonds, people are far less likely to leave that organization, A, and they're more likely to perform if B, the environment is a performance-based environment where everybody's working towards combined goals and all of these elements are in place.
The big issue for me is leadership and training. I think training is the one of the weakest parts that I have because I have stupid biases and I don't have too much expertise in that. My one of my biases is that when I know something, I think that I was the last person on this planet to get to know it. So of course, all my employees have the same level of information that I have, and it's nothing special. So, what would be your advice for me for to improve myself with training?
Yeah, so well, you really hit on communication, number one, right? So again, training and this is all one strategy. So I would say there's some communication pieces in there, but most people have an onboarding process for frontline employees, right? Do they have an onboarding process for the managers? And then what about the directors? And then what about the VPs? And then what about the C-suite, right? Because the jump from employee to manager is very big, right? And so do you have an onboarding and training for that? Then the jump from manager to director is big. Director to VP, not so big. VP to C suite, very big, right? And so organizations need to have training for every single one of these. And that training needs to talk about how are we communicating? What are the communication expectations, right? And what is our culture? And how do we want that carried? And what is your role in it as a manager, right? Most people get promoted to management because they're great at a job. Doesn't mean they have any idea how to lead people in the job. And most micromanagement, I believe, happens because the person gets promoted to management and they think everybody needs to do the job exactly like the way they did it because they were successful doing it, which is why they got promoted. Well, one of the mistakes in management, and it goes to your communication piece, is following the golden rule. The golden rule says we want to treat others as we want to be treated. We should treat others as we want to be treated. Problem is, we're all different, right? And so, Alex, you hit the nail when you said, well, I think this, so then everybody should already obviously know that, right? There's a really good chance they don't. You're exposed to information your team is not, right? And so you have to think about how does that communication flow at every single level of the organization to make sure everybody is getting it and has feedback loops. And companies do monthly town halls as a way to alleviate this issue. Hey, these are the topics that came up, right? Um, I think as a leader, Alex, you should be having a weekly meeting every single week with your team, every Monday morning, kicking it off, talking about last week's performance, talking about this week's goals, talking about what keeps you up at night and what gives you hope for tomorrow, right? And letting people understand how they fit into this. I had a startup operation that I was leading and had my Monday meeting and the first one, and I brought the P&L up, threw it up on the screen and started talking about it. And at first, people were like, why in the hell is Jim showing us this? The P&L, right? It doesn't pertain to us. And then I really explained to them how what they're doing is affecting this. And then once I did that, then they all started looking forward to that P&L discussion because they understood how they fit into it. There's some companies I work with where it's a top down, only the leader knows the financial health of the organization. How can employees make good decisions if they don't understand the financial health of the organization? How do they know if they should be cutting their costs? Maybe saving that extra piece of paper, right? Maybe not wasting that little tiny resource that to an employee just seems mundane, but it all adds up, right? That's that communication that as a leader, you should be sharing with your people every week.
I will definitely set something up.
All right.
I have some meetings that are not structured, and I think making the some of the meetings have structure would really benefit us as a team for sure. James, you
Here's the
mentioned that you
key to
had
your.
a startup.
Mhm.
What was it?
So I worked for an organization that was expanding across the nation. This was 90 01. This was 01, so 2001, and I started, and so I was opening a division in a new state for a national organization. Did that incredibly successfully, and then I did it again in another state, and then again, and then that's when I was brought in, recruited out of that company by people that used to work there. And then I started, and then I got my experience in the turnaround space. So then I was involved leading a turnaround, and then I led another turnaround, and then a third, and then I got into the tech startup space. And it's interesting. I was once asked, "Do you prefer startups or turnarounds?" And at the time, I gave the politically, "Oh, well, they're both great for different reasons." And I really love startups. The energy of a
What
startup
is a
is
turnaround? I have no idea.
an organization that's not doing well and it needs to improve its performance. So for whatever reason, the organization is not performing, and we got to help them
Hmm.
perform. So that's what a turnaround is.
So it's the management organizations that buy out failing companies and then put in a new head, give them the tools, give them the processes, and the company improves. That kind of thing.
Correct. Exactly.
Mm. All
Alex,
right.
when you talk about
So you like
structures for your
startups better.
meetings, oh, totally. Startups are a blast, right? Everybody's involved. I always say, as the leader of a startup, you better be ready to clean the toilets and take out the trash because everybody's doing everything to be successful. And when everybody is involved in that shared goal,
Everybody is shitting and putting trash everywhere.
well, hopefully not, but yes, to your point. Um, Alex, back to your meetings, I recommend a 50-50 structure to every single meeting. 50% of it's quantitative, right? Here are the numbers. 50% of it's qualitative, right? And when you can have meetings structured this way, now that qualitative can be training, it can be recognition, it can just be communication aspects, right? It can be, hey, what are you guys doing this weekend? Whose personal life can we talk about, right? Because again, we spend so much time together that we should talk about our personal life so that everybody knows and can get to know people at a deeper level. I can't tell you how many times I've been leading this type of a discussion and had somebody say, "Oh my God, I had no idea that was going on with you." Right. And because most employees don't really talk about it because it doesn't pertain to their job description. And so they just do their job. When we can know people at a more personal level, back to that social bonding, then we are more inclined to work harder with these people because we're all in it together pursuing those shared goals.
I get it. How's life for you? How did you get that your lifestyle when you work from home in front of the camera is the thing for you? Did you miss the office environment when you can mingle, when you can have cooler conversation, when transferring to remote?
Yeah, full transparency, Alex, I don't miss the office at all. The only thing I miss about the office is breaking bread with people. That's it. The sharing a cup of coffee in the morning, going to lunch, going to happy hour, that kind of bonding I miss. But you know what I don't miss is someone tapping me on the shoulder and saying, "Hey Jim, you got a second? Can I just ask you this quick question?" Because it's never a quick question. It's always a 15 to 20-minute conversation, right? And so no, I spend my days with headsets on and I just work and I grind and I like it. I'm one of those people that likes to just focus. I'm an introvert by nature, so I just really enjoy that. My productivity is significantly higher than when I was in the office because of those social things. People want to chat, and you know, you're walking down the hallway and you see, "Hey, how's it going?" Well, now I've just taken 15 minutes of my day away, and great, glad I did it. But now I've got 15 minutes of work to make up. Right. So, yeah, Alex, I've been working from home since 2018, and I really love it. It's great. I get to I get to work with my little English bulldog underneath my desk. So, although he's not little because he's an English bulldog, but yeah, I really enjoy the aspect of working from home.
Where do you live? What kind of climate?
I live in a Chicago suburb, so Midwest climate, and spring in the Midwest is one of the most beautiful places on the planet. It's just absolutely gorgeous. Now we have summer, but it's been you know, I don't know if you know this, but the global weather patterns are kind of jacked up right now, and so the weather here has been extremely mild for a summer. We've only hit above 90, I think, like 2 days, and it's been in the high 70s, low 80s most days. So it's absolutely beautiful. I'm a Californian by birth. So I was born and raised in Southern California. So people ask me how I like the snow and do I miss the perfect weather. And I always say, I like the snow actually for the first 3 months. It's the last 2 months that I go crazy. So I've grown to really like the seasons here. And Chicago is one of the world's best cities. So it's hard to beat. It's hard to beat Chicago for its music scene, for its food, for its culture. There's every restaurant you could think of exists here. So it's a really cool environment right on Lake Michigan. It's a very clean city and it's a beautiful city. I love it.
Oh, so you have long winters and kind of mild summers.
Well, we haven't had a long winter or a harsh winter in over a decade. I haven't had to really shovel my driveway. Yeah, I'm one of those people. I prefer a shovel in over a decade. You know, 15 years ago, I broke a snowblower because the snow was so deep outside. I haven't seen anything close to a 5-inch snowstorm in 10 years.
Mm.
So the winters are becoming much more mild here.
When you talked about how you miss the office environment for having food with people, I think that's the only thing that might be missing about office as well. The last startup that I worked for was exquisite about it. It was in Bangkok, and it was in a shopping center where every time you have lunch, you can have lunch in a different place with different cuisine. And Thai people are foodsies, so the choice is quite good.
Nice. That's
It
cool.
was the
Yeah,
best.
I, I can see why you would miss that, Alex. I would miss that as well, for sure. It's a the breaking of bread is such a bonding thing for as well. I really like the when people have potlucks in the office and everybody brings their own dish, right, to share their culture. I always really enjoyed when we set those up because people are proud to share their cultural heritage, and doing it through cuisine is the best way. So I do miss that a lot.
Mhm. I think my thing was doing Italian food. So I'm like, what do I really bring to the potluck? I don't know. Cross cultural cuisine is not in this high praise in those things. So I'm like, I like Thai food. I like Italian. What do I really make? What is the thing that you are gonna, what you're working on improving in the next year for your professional life and for personal life?
Yeah. Personally, my wife and I are figuring out what the next phase is. We are becoming empty nesters. Our children, one of our children is out of college, and the next one is in college, going into the junior year. So, with an empty house, what do we do next? We want to travel. We want to travel abroad. So that's very, I'd say that's personal. Professional, it's just to continue to share, this knowledge. My book is an operator's guide. My sister was reading this book and she said, Jim, what are you holding back for your consulting business? And I said, nothing. A person can literally buy my book called Leadership is Not Enough. It's on Amazon, and they can read it front to back and implement everything and create a highly successful environment. The challenge is most leaders don't have the time and they don't have anybody on the team with the bandwidth and the expertise to do it. So that's why they hire a consultant. But they read the book to understand why and the what and the how. Right. So I just plan on continuing to share this message. I believe the universe wants this message shared, that we as organizations need to stop looking at our great leaders and start looking in our environments that people work within if we really want to create optimal performance, and if we want to get rid of the quiet quitting and the less than productive workforce. Well, who again, you can't motivate a starving person. So let's create environments where people are thriving, and when that happens, we all thrive.
It's a great message to spread, indeed.
Thank you.
And I like this tandem that you have with your book because it's the ideal advertising for you.
Yes, it is.
For example, when I'm reading a book, I know that the person who made the book is better at those things than me, even after reading the book.
Yeah.
So,
Well, Alex,
definitely.
you'll have to give me your address, and I'll send you a signed copy.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. It might take a bit to get to where you're living, but I'll get it there.
All right. Is there something that you want to point the people who are watching the episode apart from the book?
Um, no, I would just say to all the business leaders out there, recognize your people are your greatest asset. The underdeveloped potential of your people is your greatest asset. Treat your people like assets, invest in them, develop them. Your job as a leader is to develop your people, plain and simple. right? When you develop them, they produce better returns. This isn't altruistic. It is why? Because organizations are either growing or they're dying. It's simple math, right? Your expenses will go up next year, so your revenue line needs to exceed that. How do you make your revenue line grow? By performing. And how do you perform? You create the right environment where people actually want to. They're going to perform for their reasons, not yours. Quit making it about you, the leader. Create an environment where your people want to perform because they're going to do it for their reasons. And if you create that incentive for them to do it, then they will do it just intrinsically. I hope that helped, Alex.
Great message. Yeah.
Awesome.
Alrighty. I hope to talk to you more on the podcast. We will
Super cool.
chat about that. For now, thank you.
Thank you, Alex.